Hello and welcome back to another episode of To Whom It May Concern. I'm your host Malak, here with my co-hosts Mariam, Khuwaila, and Inara.
Hey, assalamu alaikum.
So ladies, funny thing, it has actually been 6 months since Ramadan.
Wow.
Time is literally flying.
Yeah, so we're at that halfway mark where we'll be fasting again in 6 months.
Inshallah.
So, inshallah, ala khair. So, how do you guys feel? How are you feeling spiritually in the past 6 months? What have you done, not done, or tried to keep up with?
It's been difficult. After Ramadan, I feel like, you're able to keep that momentum for a little bit. And then as soon as school started, it slowly dwindled down. And now, recently, I'm just like, you do the basics, of course. Like, you usually do the regular, like, praying and try to get Quran in. But I feel like you get so busy with your day-to-day tasks that you forget to, like, reflect and think.
Build that connection.
Yeah, it just becomes routine. And I feel like I'm not, like, thinking about what I'm doing. It's just very, like, robotic.
I mean, I agree with you, Inara. I think things get really hectic once school starts, and you try to make a list for yourself, or something where you're like, I'm just going to do a little bit each day because, a little goes a long way. But I'm kind of the same. I try to keep up with my 5 salahs. But what I started doing is listening to the Seerah of the Prophet by Yasir Qadi. So I feel like that's easy to do because I'm a commuter. So I kind of just plug it into my car, and while I'm driving, I try to listen to it. But I'm only on episode 2, so hopefully I stick through the whole thing. I know it's a long series, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think something is better than nothing. And I think that's a good idea, just like in our commute, like for people who drive or take the trains, to listen to different, Islamic lectures and like podcasts to kind of help continue strengthening your iman and your spirituality.
I feel like after Ramadan finished, it was, like you guys mentioned, the momentum, and then now it's become more difficult, even to the point where I feel like I'm just so busy with work and with the time change, it's so much harder to even keep up with my prayers. Like I'll pray Dhuhr, that's fine. And then Asr and Maghrib are just so close to each other that by the time I get home, it's already Isha. And it's like, where has the time gone? And it's me not even realizing because I'm just so consumed with work and school and this and that.
And right, I mean, the time change just recently happened, so all of us are trying to adjust our schedules and like remember, because before we had Dhuhr till 5 p.m. and now like it's Isha.
It's like I was able to get home and I'd be able to pray Asr, and now it's Isha time. So
honestly, this time change has me so tripped. Like,
yeah.
I literally, it's 5 p.m., maybe 5:30 p.m., and it's so dark outside. By 7, I'm ready to be in bed. Like, my day is complete. I'm exhausted.
It feels like it's midnight.
Yeah, subhanAllah, how much the sun plays a role.
It really does. And there's also like a correlation between people like having more depression and depressing symptoms during that time. But anyway, so that right now I'm feeling really guilty about. And I think my issue is that I don't have like a list of things or goals that I want to accomplish Islamically. So I feel like that's making it easier for me to slack off and not holding myself accountable.
So if you had a list of what you would like to get done, then you'll like feel like you're progressing and kind of being consistent with
like during Ramadan I didn't even have a list at that time either. But it was easier, I guess, with the whole like spirit of Ramadan and the shayateen all being caged up. So it was easier to have like a schedule in my head of what I wanted to do, as opposed to now it's like I don't think I can still keep that up just having it in my head, because it's so much easier for me to like push it off, or like, oh, I don't have to read Quran tonight, or I think it'll be easier if I were just to have something to hold myself accountable for.
Right, so that's going to be on your to-do list, Khuwaila. You have to write yourself.
Yeah, and it's just so busy with everything else, but it has to be a priority.
I feel like that's very important, just making it a priority. Like how I make all my classes and my homework a priority. Exactly. Like how I make my deadlines for work a priority. I need to add, my Islamic goals and make those a priority in my day-to-day life as well.
I think we always think it's going to take up so much more time than it actually does too. So for example, when you're like, I have to read the Quran, it's like you probably thought longer about reading the Quran than if you actually just picked up the Quran and read for the 5 minutes that you wanted to. But I also think we shouldn't be down on ourselves as well. Like, we should also look at the good things that we do and to put it into perspective.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's about our intention in what we're doing. And I feel like we could be getting good deeds by just changing our intention. So, Khwali, you're constantly working, you're seeing patients. Like, if you change your intention to be like, I'm
No.
doing this and I'm helping people for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you could get a lot of good deeds for that. So, I
That's
think
true.
sometimes as simple as just changing our intentions and refreshing them so that we can get the good deeds. And it's a type of ibadah in that sense.
And I'm sure it would feel less stressful if I were to do that.
Yeah.
I'm going to put a reminder on my phone.
And we always think that like showing our religion has to be some like big extravagant like good deeds, like when you sully you're gonna sully with like 30 extra rukas or something, but it could be as simple as like giving $1 to sadaqah when
Smiling
you can
to somebody.
yeah, smiling to someone, or like looking at trash on the floor and being like, man, I really don't want to pick that up, but I'm gonna pick that up for the sake of Allah. And just it's like little things that we can implement in our life that can help us with our check-ins. But one more thing is, I was talking to someone actually the other day, and they were saying how they don't pray sunnah because they feel like they don't want to and they don't have that intention, so they'd rather just not pray it. And like for them that made sense. Like if I'm not going to have good intentions while praying it, I'm not going to pray it. And I was telling her, don't do that. Like I'd rather you do the action, and maybe the intention won't be there yet, but it will come inshallah, like eventually.
Right. No, that makes sense. Like,
Like-
instead of giving up on the action, don't regress. Like continuously work on yourself. Try to change those thoughts so that they become more positive. But until then, don't give up on yourself.
Yeah, because if you use that mentality towards everything, it's easy to be deterred quickly.
Yeah, and then how do you can't always ensure that your intention is where it should be, you know? Like, sometimes you do things and you're not so concerned with what your intention is, or you're not consciously saying, like, this is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the name of Islam, you know? You're just doing your day-to-day thing, so.
But how do you keep that motivation to do that? So like you're clearly not in the mood. And you're barely doing the fard, let alone the sunnah. So how are you gonna have the motivation to do something that you're not feeling?
Honestly, this sounds a little, like, morbid, but I always think, like, if I die right now, would it have been worth sparing the 2 minutes or something? Like, if I'm in my car and I'm listening to the radio and I think, oh, did I say my dua for the car? Did I say Ayat al-Kursi? And then I think, instead of thinking, like, I just think to myself, I should just do it again, because if I were to die right now, is it worth listening to 2 more minutes of music or something like that? Which I feel like, I mean, maybe to some people it's like really like idealistic to think that way, but I do try to think like, if I were to die, what would I take with me? So maybe
So
I
you
could
know
spare.
that quote, and it's like operating on fear and hope and being in the middle. Malak leans towards the fear.
I'm just
And
saying,
that causes
like,
her to do things.
yeah, like I
motivates
could
her.
always YouTube a song, but if something were to happen right now, I'd want to at least to know that I did what I was supposed to, and then.
No, I think that's a good way to remind ourselves. I think death is always a good way to kind of get us going. I also would say everybody is different in what motivates them and gets them going. So I recommend thinking back as to like when you are feeling like when you're not in the mood, what helps you change that? So how do you get your other tasks done? And just like what you did there, you could apply it to your Islam. So like how do you get yourself to do your assignment?
Like use that same type of
Yeah, so like what
encouragement.
motivates you to do your homework? So use the same way to get yourself to do your homework, to do your Islamic goals.
Or even for salah, if you're having a hard time getting up to pray or stopping what you're doing or something, like start to think of it as a break from what you're doing. You know, like we study, for me personally, we study, and then honestly, when salah comes around, when it's a new prayer, I'm like, oh great, like get adhan, let me go pray, so I could use
It's like a little break.
10 minutes to
Yeah.
myself. Yeah, I swear. And I feel like I appreciate it more in this master's program because I sit, you know, in the library more oftentimes than I don't. So I really do feel like I use it as a break. And it's funny, but I like make extra tasbih and I'll like take my time. Like I really drag it out, but I do try to use it as a break, as an excuse for a break.
I feel like that can go either way.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know
Like-
if you should do that.
Oh
but-
no, like what I mean is right now with your master's program, you studying all the time. It can go either way. Like you either are more inclined to work on your Islam or like you're just too busy where you don't care to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I could see what you're saying. I do find myself, I'm kind of somewhere in the middle, as in like I said, I try to use my salah as a break, but I'm not going like above and beyond spiritually, trying to fit in, you know, between all my studies and all my homework and stuff like that. It's kind of just doing what I have to, I guess, as of right now. I mean, salah is one of the most important actions a Muslim needs to do, of course, but I feel like there are so many other important things that we don't even consider because we're too busy to even think that we have to do that. Khawaila said reading Quran, for an example, like we may not consistently memorize new surahs and stuff like that because we're so busy with our day-to-day activities, but that's just as important as praying. But we don't even consider that a thing you should be doing every day. When we know that somebody's reading Quran, we're like, wow, you are a superstar Muslim. Like, but in reality, it's supposed to be what we're doing.
It's also going back to the basics, being good to your family and making sure your parents are doing okay and pleasing them.
And going back to like your character and your action towards others, how you're taking care of your relationships. I think we oftentimes like overlook that and don't.
Or sometimes like we are doing that, but we don't realize that's also an Islamic thing. And then if you're not doing it, we should also realize that it's very Islamic and that we should work on it.
I'm going to go back to like what motivates me and or what can I do to motivate myself when I feel like I'm slacking. And what I do is I try and like tell people to do it together. So I make it kind of not a challenge, but okay, let's wake each other up for Fajr. Or okay, both of us are going to try and read the Quran by the end of Ramadan, or both of us will take this class. So it also gives you a sense of accountability and also makes you feel like you're going with someone else. And it's like more of a team thing. So it's like community.
Yeah, you're not doing it alone.
You grow together.
It's actually funny that you say that because the girls that I went to undergrad with, they have, for example, Fajr group chats where every like 6 or 7 girls are a group, and then it's every week or something like that. It changes. But it's one girl's responsibility to call everybody else in that group and be like, oh, are you up for Fajr? Whatever. Like,
that's
get up and pray at
exhausting, though.
It is,
like, you have
but
to
when
call 6, 7 other people. What if a few of them aren't waking up? Oh my god.
No, like if they don't wake up, you did your part. But it's just like everybody checking in on each other. Like, oh, are you awake? Can you pray? Like, get up and pray or something like that.
Yeah, I like that. I feel like another thing that helps motivate me to like pray and keep going, just thinking back about all the blessings. So sometimes it's just the little things that you realize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done for you, and you can't take a couple of minutes out of your day to like thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all your blessings. So sometimes it's just like thinking about all the things that you have, and so I feel like gratitude is what kind of gets me to turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and like to stay motivated.
When I'm sitting there, you know, when you're like your spiritual like fluids or juices start flowing and you're like, wow, I never thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for my ability to see or something like that.
Yeah.
So when I get in that and I'm like, wow, alhamdulillah for hearing and alhamdulillah for seeing and alhamdulillah, I'm like, man, I just opened up a can of worms. Like, this can go on forever. I'm like, alhamdulillah for everything I do and don't mention. Like,
when I'm on that like spiritual high, I'll go around to my family members and I'm like, do you know God loves you?
Oh my God, you sound like you sound like one of those Christian people. Like, Jesus loves you.
He is with you.
I think when I appreciate my salah the most, like obviously you hope you appreciate it every day, but the most is when like you're praying Aisha and you're praying like that witted and you just have a hard time, like that day was bad and you're in your sujood or you're in prostration and you just like let it all out and you're like, God already knows, and this is like, you feel like there's no barrier.
Yeah.
And that's when I feel like the most
It's a vulnerable connection.
But also not like it's okay to be vulnerable to God. Like it's not like God's
there's
gonna
no
judge you.
judgment or
Yeah.
anything.
He knows already. So you feel like there's a freedom that
Like
you can't get when you talk
like
to other people.
It's a safe connection.
And you feel like you'll be taken care of. So like whatever issues that you had spilled and like told Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know at the end, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is gonna take care of you. So like not only did you open up and share all, you know, your pains or what your day has been like, you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to take care of everything.
And the first part, in order to, I guess, have those moments with Allah, it's to create that relationship with Him where you are comfortable enough to do that.
I mean, don't get it wrong. It is hard. I don't want to say it's hard, but
It's
like,
awkward in the beginning.
yeah. I've tried it where I just like talk out loud. Like I'm like, yeah, like let me talk to God. Like, let me clear the air a little bit.
100%.
And it's just like, this is weird. So funny. The other day we were traveling. We were road tripping. So, you know, like, the diet of a traveler is supposed to be, like, mustajib. Like, it's going to be answered. So, like, the last hour of our trip back home, I was just silent and sitting in the passenger seat. So, my friend turns to me. She's driving. She's like, are you sleeping? I'm like, no, I'm trying to make diet. And then, you know, when you start making diet for one person, and then I was like, man, I got to include this person, then this person, and now I'm saying names, and I'm like, man, I always do this. And I just started to, like, generalize I'm like, my aunts and my uncles, like,
You put
خالاتي,
yourself in-
خوالي, جدي, جداتي, عمي, you know, like, I
Yeah.
just start, like, trying to generalize.
Malak, I like how you include a lot of people in your du'as. And I think I remember I attended this one lecture and the guy was saying, like, look at people that you don't know and just make du'a for them. And I remember I was going through, like, the convention and you just, like, look at random people and, like, make du'a for them. You know, you look at people's faces. I swear, and it made you feel this, like, stronger bond with people without even, like, people don't even know you're making du'a for them. I swear it was so beautiful. Try it.
You know, I was like, you get a diet, you get a diet.
Yeah, and it's
That's
free.
so
Like that's the thing. Like, why should we be stingy with our job? But you just look at other people. I'm like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like, if she's experiencing any difficulties, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like, ease her, pains or whatever. And you just feel that, like, stronger bond, or let her kids be the coolness of her eyes. Like, she's carrying a baby or, like, smiling. So just something as simple as that, just connecting with the other people and making dua for people you don't even know, I think is very powerful.
That's interesting. I don't think I've ever thought of doing that, like walking down the street and making dua for the random people I come across.
Yeah, try it.
I've never done, like, random, but anything I know that I'm struggling with or I'm doing, I try to make diet for those around me, that Allah make me succeed in dental school or something. Then I'll say, oh, and let her succeed in medical school and let her get accepted to her program. So, like, but that's usually people I know. I mean, I've never picked out random
Yeah.
people, and I'm like, yeah, and that guy, let him get accepted. And
Yeah.
but I do see where you're coming from, like, and it makes you feel a little less selfish. Like, some diet for me, some diet for you, you know, like.
I also want to insert this here because people think that if you struggle at being a Muslim, then you're a bad Muslim. And I think that's not true. Because when you're struggling, that means you have the awareness, you have the consciousness. That means you are having an internal battle with yourself and you're trying to overcome whatever you're going through or whatever you think is making you not as good of a Muslim as you want to be. I think when you are at the point of, like, complacency where you think, okay, this is the best Muslim I'm going to be, or I'm at my perfect Islam. Or if you're at the place of where, oh, I don't care that I'm not doing things that are Islamic or to enhance my Islam. I think those are the 2 points where you should be really worried. But I think if you're struggling, that should be a good sign that you're at least trying to be better.
That's true. It's the struggle between yourself is the worst of all. Like, being Muslim nowadays is difficult, especially when you look at the media and the people you come across and just, like, the misconceptions that everyone has. But I feel like for at least us, where we are coming from, it would be the internal struggle that's probably the more difficult one.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you guys are saying, because oftentimes I feel like when we're talking about our personal experiences or, like, what we're saying, the things that we do, at least personally, how I say, like, you know, I try to read my diet and stuff like that, it kind of makes it seem like we're also in the perfect state of Islam, and we're really not either. I mean, there are so many things that we could do better in our day-to-day activities, but it's nice to try to start to do something small. Like, pick anything. Just say, like, every morning I'm going to read Qul Huwallahu Ahad, like one of the shortest surahs in the Quran. You know, it's just a matter of starting somewhere and just knowing that you hold this activity between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, like, you don't even have to tell anybody about it because you think it's so small. But a little every day goes further than a lot at one time. Just give yourself that opportunity, or open that door between you and God where you're like, I want to do this. I want to start this here. And just kind of go from there. Take it day by day.
Yes.
And if you slack some days, don't stop. Just pick it up the next day.
Right. Start small and be consistent with it.
Some days are easier than others. And a lot of times people go through these, like, struggles at some point in life. And it's like, it's hard to see where, I guess, like, the light at the end of the tunnel is at that point. And a lot of times you won't realize it until you look back in hindsight. Have you guys ever, like, experienced anything like that?
Like an external struggle where you're like, man, that really pushed my life back.
Yeah, because at times it's like, oh my God, we're going through all this struggle, and it's like, it sucks, and your faith can go either way. And it's at that point, you're kind of, like, lost in limbo, like, what's going to happen?
Last year, so I had applied to my social work program, and I had applied, I guess, later than I made the deadline, but it was one of the later applicants. So I got accepted, but they said I had to wait a year. So my plan was, I was hoping to have started, like, right away. Last year, I did not want to wait another year to start my master's program. So I was, like, annoyed. I was like, oh, like, wow, like, I have to wait another year. So it was very frustrating, and I'm just like, oh, what am I going to do now? But subhanAllah, I ended up, getting hired at my job. They hired me full time, and I, got salary and with benefits and all of that. I was able to save up and get myself a car. And subhanAllah, like now I'm starting my social work program. And at the time I didn't have a car. I started my social work program this year, and I just realized, I'm like, subhanAllah, like how much I need my car for like to get to places. Come like I'm constantly driving everywhere in Chicago because of my internship. And I'm like, if this was the case last year, if I were to have gotten accepted, I wouldn't have had a car, so it would have been very difficult for me to go to school and do my internship for the school.
Yeah, and do what you needed for it.
Right. So I'm like, subhanAllah, like even though at that moment I wanted to like start school right away, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had other plans for me, and I feel like that was just to make my life a lot easier now.
So like in hindsight, you appreciate it more.
Yeah, right. Like last year I was just like, oh my God, like this, I can't believe I didn't get it. I have to wait another year to get into my program and start. But now looking at it, I'm like, oh, wow, alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had delayed it for me so that I could afford a car, so that I could be able to do what are the requirements for my schooling.
And it wasn't a year lost, because that year you were able to accomplish things that would support your graduate education.
Right.
I guess I have a similar story kind of, where when I was applying to law schools, I really, really wanted to get into this one school. And it was my dream school. It's like a distance from my house. It's 2 hours away, so I'd have to live down there. And I went and I made my parents go visit it. We took tours. I talked to admissions people. I talked to alumni that went there, and we were like, okay, what's the best place to live on campus or off campus? Like, there was no way that I wasn't going to the school, because all my grades matched up with the school. All my, my LSAT scores matched up, all the volunteering things. I got into schools that were better than this school. And it was my dream school. It was everything I wanted. And I can't stress this enough, you guys. Like, there was no other option in my mind.
I
like,
remember you talking about it.
Yeah, I only applied to other schools as like
Safety schools.
Yeah. And subhanAllah, I ended up not getting into this school. And it was so heartbreaking. Like, I went to the other school orientation and I was like, I'm stuck in this school and I didn't even want it. It doesn't have the program I wanted. Whatever. Alhamdulillah. Well, I wasn't saying alhamdulillah at the time. I was like super upset because I didn't understand. So subhanAllah, this year, so this is my third year of law school. And this whole year, my mom has had health issues, has been in and out of the hospital, has done serious surgeries. And like right after her serious surgery, she ended up getting into a really bad car accident. And looking at it now, I think there is no way I would have been able to go to school 2 hours away and have been with my mom because she needed me. I probably would have had to take a year off so I could stay with my mom for like the 2 or 3 months that she needed me.
Or you would have neglected your mom.
Yeah, which wasn't a thing, like, because I would have stayed with my mom. I wouldn't no, my parents probably would have been like, no, go to school, whatever. But you know how you're just not in it to win it. And even going to my downtown school seems like a struggle when my mom is sick in the hospital. And I was like, subhanAllah. Like, it would have been such a bad situation for me to be in. And that's what I wanted so bad a couple years ago. And I don't see the benefit of it till like right now, this year, my third year about to graduate. And I was still, before this year, I was like, man, what would have happened if I would have went to that school? I probably would have had a better choices or better options, or I would have liked it more, or the feeling. And it's not until like literally this semester where I'm like, subhanAllah, Allah is a better planner than you are.
Yeah, it's all about trusting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And like we've said, you don't see it until looking back, like until you've experienced everything, and then you look back, you're like, oh wow, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you were taking care of me, you were looking out for me, even though I was probably being a brat, like, no, I want it now, you know what I mean? And then, being that impatient person. But subhanAllah, even till today, like, we say this, but it's so hard to grasp.
It is hard.
Like,
if you're going through a struggle and it's like you don't know why or how it's going to end or how long it's going to last. Or
it's always easier to say things in hindsight. Well, like Mariam said, at the moment you're not like, oh, this is what God has planned. I mean, some people have the power to do that, but, it's always like, well, why didn't this happen? Or maybe I didn't work hard enough towards it, or maybe I didn't do enough. You're always doubting and stuff, but in hindsight, it's easier to say, oh, alhamdulillah, this was better for me, or this opened up this door for me, or something like that.
And to be honest, I was beating myself over. I was like, man, I should have took the LSAT
Yeah.
again. I could have got a higher score.
Yeah, definitely.
I should have shadowed more people, got a better letter of recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
I could have
Wrote a better personal statement. I
Exactly.
could have showed more interest in the school.
applied earlier.
Yeah, there's always a million and one things you start to think about, like, what could I have done differently, or what could I do differently?
So then it's normal to have, I guess, that disappointment or the sadness or question why. I guess where it just becomes unhealthy is if you can't move past it after a certain period of time.
Yeah, because even how many times does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala call in the Quran for us to have faith in Him? You know,
Tawakkul,
like,
yeah.
it's always tawakkul, like, do what you can and put the rest up to me. And that's not to say that don't work hard towards your dreams or whatever you hope to accomplish and to succeed in this lifetime, but it's also to have that in the back of your head that you can only do so much before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has something better planned for you, or something bigger, or it's just not the time sometimes, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I found crazy the other day? I remember having this conversation, and me and another Muslim person were studying for an exam, and I'm like, man, I made so much dua that I'm going to pass, and everything I remember is going to be on the test. And she said, why make dua? I studied hard enough. I know I'll pass on my own. Like, I don't need dua.
Oh, sis.
And I'm like, but what if the teacher puts every single question that you didn't memorize on that exam?
Or, like, words it so oddly.
That you fail. Like, I don't. And she's like, but then it's on me. Like, if I pass or fail, it's on me, not on God. Like, God won't help me in those situations.
Or how about if you blank out? Like, if you tawakkal ala Allah,
I
you
don't even
give all of this.
It's not even about that. Like, even if you
I feel
do
like it's just
well,
a comfort.
I think it's just more so like you having that ease of heart, and I guess
Yeah, that's really what it is. It's just a comfort and knowing, like, being at ease that you've done your part and whatever happens is meant to happen. But it's so funny that you mentioned that, because I was listening to a lecture, I want to say by Numan Ali Khan. I forgot the title of it, but where he was basically also saying that sometimes we think of dua as transactional. Like,
Yeah.
we'll say, oh, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like you said, I made so much dua, and if you don't succeed, like, you expect the dua to be answered at that moment, and if you made dua, for example, to this exam and you don't do good, and you're like, well, I made so much dua, so, like, what happened there?
Like,
He's like, it's not a 3 to 5 business day thing.
Right.
Like, this is not
Amazon Prime.
Yeah, he basically, did you? I'm like, that's the exact example he said.
Yes, I
But
think
it's
I've heard
funny
of it.
because we do think of it like that.
I think it's just we expect it to be answered. That's why. So it's like I made dua to get an A. Why'd I fail?
Honestly, it's so like, I'm talking about from personal experience. It's so hard to just let things go. Like, it is so, personally, sometimes I find it so hard to just say, like, this is what's meant to be. You know
It
what I'm
is.
saying? Like,
You get angry with yourself, cause
Yeah.
especially if you think you could have done more, which you always do if you don't do well.
yeah, exactly. Like, oh, maybe I should have spent more time doing this. Maybe I should have spent more hours. I shouldn't have done that instead. And then you just come to a point, I think, where you're just like, if I'm going to question everything that goes wrong, I'm never going to be happier. I'm never going to
I
be
think it
okay with things.
I think it depends on the situation. Sometimes things are not in our control, and that's when you're just like, this is all Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's coming from Allah, like, I need to be patient during this time. But I think it's healthy for us to think, what could I do differently so that I have a better outcome? I think that's something that we do need to have to a certain extent, depending on what the issue is. So I wouldn't say totally throw that out.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's always the hardest question, because there's such a fine line between, like, when do I keep going, or when is this truly, like, not meant for me? So I think that's always the hardest line we have to, like, battle with. And it shouldn't be a clear answer, because it's always like you're going to
It
want
never
to.
will be.
Yeah. So if you're ever thinking you're going to get a
it's
clear
not-
answer,
It's not
gonna
meant to
happen.
be easy. That's true.
This whole like thing of like what's meant to be qada and qadar, it's no one knows. So like people always say, oh, it's not my nasib, or like who knows what I'm meant to be. No one is able to answer that, so you just do your part and make the best decisions you can with the information that you have.
I feel like now thinking about it, there's kind of a beauty in not being able to answer that question. Because then you're never, I feel like you're never held to a standard necessarily. You know, like you
What do you
never
mean?
know, like you never know what you were meant to do. Therefore, you can never judge how far you've come.
But then whatever you end up doing, is
Is
that
what
not
you're
what
meant
you're
to do.
meant to do?
No. Okay, you just confused me. No, I'm saying like, Okay, let's say you end up doing
Trippy.
something completely different than what you had thought was gonna be your life
But
plan.
that's what you're meant to do.
Yeah, I know, but because you weren't able to answer that question yourself. I don't know that this is like I want to do this in life, but I don't know that it's meant for me to do it. So when I end up doing something else, it's not like I failed.
Exactly.
It's just that something else was my journey or what I was supposed to do.
It gets confusing when you want something and then it doesn't work out. So it's like that. Now what?
This is the journey we call life, ladies.
Yeah, because what's the point of living if you already know what everything's gonna happen?
Yeah.
It does make it easier. I always say that. Like, I wish I just knew what's gonna happen in this by this time. Or like, I wish you can just fast forward 10 years and see where I am. And
Usually it's the anticipation that is more rewarding and causes more happiness than the actual result. So enjoy the journey. And
isn't that the Hannah Montana song?
And that usually happens because we're so hard on our own selves, like harder than necessary. And I don't know if that's a cultural thing
Or just like we
or
have
just a
these
human
high.
nature thing. But you're always like, oh, I should have known that, or of course that was the answer. I should have known that answer. And it's like, no, you're not gonna know everything.
that's literally at my internship, I have a clinical supervisor that I have to meet with weekly, and we discuss like what happened. And so we break down the situation, and she will like share something with me, and I'm like mind blown. I'm like, how come I didn't know that? How come I didn't think to do that? And she'll tell me, she's like, Inara, if you knew everything, you wouldn't need me. This is why we have clinical supervision, so we could talk about things. And I'm supposed to enlighten you, because if you already knew everything, you wouldn't
Be in
need
training.
you wouldn't be like, here, you wouldn't be learning, you wouldn't need me, you wouldn't need this internship. I'm like, yeah, I guess that's true. And yeah, she tries to tell me it's okay not to know, like, you don't have to be perfect at everything, you know.
It really is just like the way we
I
look
love
at
how your
it.
social work is like, you don't have to be perfect at anything, and mine is like, you have to take a class to make sure you're perfect at everything, because if you screw up in the real world, you're done. You're done.
That's so funny.
My professional responsibilities class.
Oh wow. That's tough. I feel like it's the same way with medicine though. It's more pressure to not necessarily maybe
Okay,
because
well, imagine your doctor doesn't know everything.
exactly. But no, we have at least the thing is I remember one of my attendings said that it's not necessarily about knowing the answer, it's at least knowing where to get the right answers. So like having the proper resources there where you can easily find it. Overall, it's just I guess our perspective on how we are about life, the difficulties that we face in life, and how we make the best of it.
I find it so funny how we're like, yeah, all these struggles that we've had and everything, and we're like barely
Alhamdulillah.
lived a full life, you know? Like, yeah, of course.
Only
alhamdulillah for
25 years
everything.
old.
And
Exactly.
even
and
our
we're like,
struggles up to this point isn't like some people go through hardships, like being homeless, having a lot of people in your family like die from nowhere.
Yeah.
Being, in a car accident, and all of a sudden you're the only survivor in that car. Like some people have really, really, really hard struggles and hard lows. But it's funny when you're objectively like looking at someone's life situation and you're like, man, your life struggle is so hard. How are you living every day to day? And that person's like, well, this is just my life. Like, this is what I have to do.
It's not as hard.
Yeah. They don't look at it like,
Or they might be struggling, but it's something that they are able to handle. As
Yeah.
opposed to when we look at it on the outside, it's like I would not be able to handle
I don't
that.
know how
And-
you're able to survive.
And that
this
reminds
situation.
me of one of the ayahs in Surah Al-Baqarah, where Allah is like, "La yukallifullahu nafsan illa wus'aha." So like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not burden a person
Yeah.
beyond what they can bear. So subhanallah, for us, we look at that person like, wow, how are you able to handle this? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what the individual can handle.
and they always tell you Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives his hardest struggles to his stronger soldiers. You know, like, you'll never, like you said, Inara, you'll never get more than you can handle. And even though at times you kind of feel like you're just at a breaking point or you're just having enough, just kind of realizing that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has faith that you'll push through it is kind of also relieving and also a comfort. Like sometimes you're not even rooting for yourself, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like, no, you can do this. You just have to push a little harder, look a little deeper,
And just always shift to the perspective that there is an akhirah. Because I feel like sometimes we lose the fact that this isn't it.
I mean,
At least that's what happens with me a lot of the time, where I'm so focused on like now and this dunya, and I forget that, well, there's an akhirah after you die, and everybody dies.
And compare eternity to like 70 years that we live. Like, that's crazy.
We would be living our lives drastically different if we didn't believe in the akhirah. Because it's like, what's the point of doing and going through all these struggles if it wasn't for that?
Yeah, like what are you working towards? What's the bigger picture?
I don't think life would be bearable with all its injustices if you didn't believe justice would happen eventually, like in the akhirah.
It's just, yeah, it's interesting having conversations with non-Muslims who...
Well, that's what when we're
Don't-
in
yeah.
interfaith groups, I feel like that's a topic that happens a lot. Like someone will just shoot at you, oh, then why are there wars, or why are children dying? Why are people starving? Like,
Well-
it always stumps you for a second.
My thing is, no one, or like God or religion never said there's not going to be any struggle in this life. Like, no one said it was a perfect and just world.
Actually, it's the exact opposite. God tells you he's gonna
Test you.
So,
Your
like,
health, your wealth,
yeah.
your family.
So I never,
Your age,
I
your
never
strength.
understood that argument. Like, whoever said it was going to be perfect.
And what would life be if everything was perfect?
But yeah,
Like, what would we be living? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, right, if we were perfect and if we didn't ask for help or we didn't call on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he would send a people that would need him. Like, you're not supposed to not struggle.
yeah.
It's weirder if people say they don't struggle. Like, how? There has to be something that you're struggling
Yeah,
with.
there has to be for the most
And
part.
it
but
doesn't have to
sometimes-
be, no, it doesn't have to be the same thing. Like, maybe not financially, maybe mentally, maybe not mentally, maybe physically, maybe not physically with family. You know, there's always something that you can do better at or you can have better.
Yeah, that's true.
Another really interfaith question that's always asked is, well, if God knows if you're gonna go to heaven or hell,
Oh,
then
why
why
do-
don't you just go there instead of like living life?
Or are we actually consciously making our own decisions if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what we're going to
Exactly.
decide?
Yeah, and I also don't
That's
get how.
weird questions.
No.
Yeah,
and
those are
people-
questions I've heard before.
Or like, if God knows I'm gonna do something bad, why didn't he stop me?
Why would he? You're doing it. Like,
I was like, but that's what your free will is. Like, that's what makes you a human.
Yeah.
And plus, think about it this way. If you were, like, in hell, you think you'd not complain?
Yeah.
You're like, I didn't do anything yet, God.
yeah, exactly. No, it's also interesting having like these conversations about like morality, right and wrong with people that don't have any sort of like direct faith, like not Christianity, Judaism, Islam, things like that, or like that don't have a concept of the afterlife. Because it's like, how do you, like, that's how a
How do
lot
you
of
draw
our
the lines?
Yeah, that's how a lot of our like beliefs stem from. Like, why would I do this? Why would I not want to hurt someone if I didn't believe in consequences in the akhirah?
Well, a lot of people think you should
Just be a good
be
person.
good just to be a good person, yeah. Like, you don't necessarily have to have a consequence or a reward for being good. You should just be a decent human being.
But like even a lot of those like standards do stem from like religious, like from a religious
Values.
background. Yeah. No, it was just so interesting because I was having a conversation yesterday with one of my attendings, and he was just saying how like there isn't one set standard for morality, regardless of where you go.
Yeah,
and
it's
so
all
like
objective. Or
it is
subjective,
all
sorry.
subjective. So it's like, does it even exist? And if it wasn't for the law and the consequences of the laws in place, then yeah, it would be chaos, and like would people
But
uphold
even the
morality?
law, even the laws change. Like what used to be like immoral is now moral. Or, so like we see that within the law itself,
so
it changes.
so like morality in itself is something that's always like, there isn't a basis.
In
you know
my
what I mean?
law class, if you try and justify something with like religion, you'll get left. So if you like argue why a law should or shouldn't be implemented, or why would you vote a certain way on a law, and your justification is like religious, with a religious backing, people will laugh at you.
Which is funny because a lot of the lawmakers and the laws in place do have a religious backing. But I guess that new and upcoming generations aren't like that. I feel like it's the opposite in my class. I have this one class in my MBA. It's called Corporate Social Responsibility, and there's a few pretty religious, like Christian people in my class, and it's a very discussion-heavy class. So everyone's like talking about like feelings and emotions and this and that, and they'll talk about like how they're so religious. And this one guy had like this coming to Jesus sort of thing, and he's like, I just rely on him. And everyone's pretty like, I don't know if they don't say anything, but I feel like it's just awkward listening to people have that sort of conversation.
That religious breakthrough.
Wait, so as a Muslim Khali, you also feel uncomfortable?
I don't know, because A little, yeah. Maybe because it's like I'm not used to having religious conversations in that sort of setting.
They say that things that you should often avoid is like discussions on religion, politics. And there's one more, but I forgot, so probably I talk about it.
But yeah, so like I'm a religious person, but it's still awkward having that kind of talk in a classroom. And I feel like the professor will kind of point at me, and like she mentioned, like we'd have these journals that we have to write about, and she kind of alluded, I never really spoke about anything religious in these journals, but she would allude to kind of like a spirituality of like blah blah blah. And anytime I were to talk about it in class, I never mentioned like the spiritual or the religious thing.
I think we should have these conversations, especially because a lot of things come from like misconceptions about each other's religions.
I think I can have it like a more closed, like one-on-one or like a few people. But to have it just in class, I would not.
I feel like in my classes, it's like shifting. I feel like religion is looked at negatively, but if you say spirituality, it's different. Yeah. So when you say religion and religiosity, it's like looked at with negative connotations, and even like the way I hear it.
Someone told me it was cult-like. Someone was like, religion is a cult, and I'm like, what?
It's like a man-made construct of like things. The way you have to do as opposed to spirituality is more like internal.
With meditation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so just like we kind of checked in and kind of evaluated ourselves on where we are spiritually, you guys should feel free to do that to yourselves, honestly, too. Like, just between you and God, just kind of evaluate where you are, where you'd like to be, and then things you can kind of do in order to help you get there faster. But thanks so much for tuning in and listening to this week's episode of To Whom It May Concern. It was a great conversation. Please subscribe, like, and follow us on social media. We appreciate all the support and love we've been receiving so far. You don't understand how happy it makes us when you guys DM us messages or like to talk to us about your own emotions and your own opinions on the episodes. If you don't already follow us, you could find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at The Modern Skeps. Please continue to tune in every week Tuesday mornings to listen to our episodes. If you have any ideas you'd like us to discuss, email us at modernskeptics@gmail.com. Sincerely, The Modern Skeptics. P.S. Worry ends when faith in God begins.